Good afternoon, everyone. We are gonna introduce our topic, which is pathways of risk for type 2 diabetes in U.S. racial and ethnic minorities. Several interacting pathways between physiology, lifestyle, structural, and interpersonal factors have been identified in order to identify this risk among these racial and ethnic minorities in the U.S. Well, let's start by understanding the physiological processes. First, we need to understand what is diabetes mellitus. From a linguistic point of view, it's an ancient Greek term in which diabetes is the siphon, which refers to frequent urination, and the mellitus is sweet like honey, referring to the high level of glucose in the urine among diabetic patients. Physiologically, diabetes mellitus is a group of metabolic disorder characterized by hyperglycemia resulting from defects in insulin secretion, insulin action, or both. Let's have a quick overview about the statistics of type 2 diabetes in the US. Around 21 million, which is about 9.3% of the US populations, are diabetics, and around 86 million are pre-diabetics. Among the diabetic patients in the US, more than half of them are of the racial and ethnic minorities. Examples are the Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans. In order to understand the pathophysiology of type 2 diabetes, we need to spotlight on the normal metabolism of glucose. Glucose is carried in the bloodstream in order to enter the cell via specific receptors. For these receptors to be activated, they need insulin to be unlocked first. The major theme of diabetes mellitus type 2 is the insulin resistance, in which these receptors become resistant to the action of the insulin. Hence, glucose cannot enter the cell and return back to the bloodstream, resulting in the persistent hyperglycemia among type 2 diabetic patients. The major problem of diabetes among diabetic patients relies in its complications, which varies between microvascular and macrovascular conditions. Among the microvascular conditions, diabetic retinopathy can lead to blindness. Diabetic nephropathy is the major cause of end-stage renal failure among the US population, and diabetic neuropathy, which accounts for around 80% of leg amputations after leg injury in the US. Cardiovascular diseases are considered the number one killer among the US population. The major question is why these ethnic and racial minorities in the US are at high risk of developing diabetes and its associated comorbidities. This can be accounted by the characteristic high stress levels among these minority populations, which can be explained by the high structural and interpersonal barriers, which will be further elaborated by Carly and Ralph in our presentation. Physiologically, this characteristic high stress level can lead to high level of cortisol, which have anti-insulin effect. Also, stress can lead to hypertension and elevated blood pressure, which is a well-known major risk factor of type 2 diabetes as well. In this context, we cannot ignore the genetic background of the disease, especially among these racial and ethnic minorities. Generally, diabetes mellitus type 2 is a genetic disorder to a great extent. It runs in families and has a strong genetic background due to inherited genetic mutations. If one parent has type 2 diabetes, the risk of the child getting diabetes is 1 in 7, and the risk jumps to be 1 in 2 if both parents have diabetes. However, according to the American Diabetic Association, Studies show that not everyone who carries a mutation will get type 2 diabetes, and that this genetic susceptibility is strongly shaped and modified by a variety of cultural and lifestyle factors, especially among these racial and ethnic minorities who are subjected to acculturation and westernization of their lifestyle. The influence of these lifestyle factors on diabetes risk will be further elaborated by Erin and Claire in the second section of our presentation.